service dog wouldn't stop barking at a woman carrying a baby through the crowded terminal, drawing stares from frustrated travelers and leaving his handler visibly embarrassed. Officer Naomi Green tried to pull him back, to quiet the scene, but Coda wouldn't budge. His barks were sharp, rhythmic, unshaken. The Naomi saw it. The baby hadn't moved. What followed left the entire airport frozen in disbelief. It all started with a bark no one took seriously, and ended with a truth no one saw coming. Before we dive into the full story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you love intense, real-life canine stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. The blizzard outside Rainford International Airport had turned the entire terminal into a subdued storm of stranded passengers and rescheduled flights. Giant windows shivered under the weight of ice, while departure boards flickered with red text: delayed, canceled, pending. Inside Terminal C, Lieutenant Naomi Green adjusted her jacket collar and scanned the concourse with the quiet vigilance of someone who had seen danger wear many disguises. Her canine partner Coda padded at her side, ears alert, stride measured, black and tan fur bristling gently with awareness. At first glance, they were just another pair of airport security doing a routine sweep. But Naomi knew better. This wasn't just another day. Not when Coda's gaze subtly shifted, slowing ever so slightly, his shoulders stiffening, his head lowering like a tracking missile acquiring its target. She felt it before she saw it, the air tightening around them, the weight in Coda's steps. Naomi followed his line of sight and spotted her, a well-dressed woman in her early 30s, impeccably composed despite the surrounding chaos. Her long camel coat fell perfectly across designer leggings, and cradled against her chest was what appeared to be a sleeping infant, wrapped tightly in a fleece blanket. The travelers passed by her with casual glances, but Coda stopped in his tracks. His nose twitched once, twice, then came the growl, low, vibrating, intentional. Naomi blinked. This wasn't the growl for narcotics, explosives, or even aggressive posturing. It was the one from 2 years ago, the one she hadn't heard since that night in Crestmore, when a 5-month-old baby was found drugged in the trunk of a stolen sedan. Coda had gone rigid then, just like now. Naomi's pulse ticked up. "Coda," she said under her breath. Another. Then a bark, sharp, cutting through the terminal noise like a whip crack. The woman froze. Heads turned, phones lifted. Passengers stepped back with mutters and raised brows. A security supervisor, Martinez, from Delta Ops, came jogging over. "Green? Is your dog all right?" Naomi nodded without taking her eyes off the woman. "He's..." The woman backed away half a step, shifting the baby closer to her shoulder. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with polished concern. "I'm just trying to get to my gate." Naomi approached, calm but focused. Ma'am, may I ask what flight you're on?" "I'm Delta 264 to Portland," she replied quickly. Too quickly. Naomi's gaze darted to the nearby screen. Every Delta flight to Portland had been canceled 2 hours ago. A detail, small, but it unspooled a thread inside Naomi's mind. Coda barked again, this time with a sense of urgency that sent ripples through the crowd. "He's scaring my baby," the woman protested, cradling the child tighter. Naomi's training kicked in. She raised a hand toward Martinez. "Clear the immediate area now." Martinez hesitated. "It could be a false reaction. There's no sign of weapons. It's not about weapons,
This is behavior."
Martinez sighed and began moving civilians away. Naomi crouched slightly to meet Coda's eye level. "Show me," she whispered. Coda took another step and then halted, his gaze locked on the baby. Not the woman, the baby. That was the difference. Naomi straightened and stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but with the current situation, we're going to need to verify your documents," she said evenly. "It's a protocol we run during mass cancellations, especially with minors." The woman hesitated. "That's ridiculous. I've been delayed long enough." Naomi's radio buzzed. She tapped her earpiece. "This is Green." The voice on the other end was crisp. "FYI, Delta 264's manifest doesn't list any female passengers with infants." Naomi blinked once, slowly, then looked at the woman again. Her fingers clutched the baby with such precision that it looked practiced, too perfect. Coda didn't break focus. The baby had not moved, not flinched at the barking, not stirred at the rising volume. "Is your child feeling okay?" Naomi asked gently. She's a deep sleeper, the woman replied, smiling thinly. 8 months old. Sleeps through anything. Naomi tilted her head. Name? Hannah, the woman said, then paused. I mean, Emma. The slip landed like a stone in Naomi's gut. Coda let out a small whine, one that Naomi recognized as his alert for emotional disturbance. This was not a standard interaction. This was a scene waiting to collapse into something darker. Passengers watched with cautious fascination. A few were live-stream. Martinez stepped closer. You want to detain her? Naomi hesitated, then nodded. Let's move her to security quietly. The woman's eyes flicked to the exits. Her weight shifted. Naomi felt it a second too late. Die! But the woman turned, bolting into the terminal with the child still in arms. Coda exploded forward. The chase was short. Coda was fast, faster than anyone expected. He didn't lunge, didn't bite. He stepped in front of the woman's path and stood tall, unmoving. The woman skidded to a halt and dropped to her knees, clutching the infant like a shield. Naomi closed in, breath tight in her chest. The baby still hadn't moved. As she approached, she saw it. The faintest trace of discoloration on the baby's lips. We need medics. Now. The radio call echoed across the terminal. The woman was sobbing now, rocking the child, muttering something Naomi couldn't hear. But Coda could. His ears twitched. His body remained firm, positioned protectively between the woman and the baby. This wasn't just a medical call. This was something far worse, and Naomi felt it in her bones. The same way she had felt it 2 years ago. Only this time, she wasn't going to ignore the dog. Naomi knelt slowly, drawing closer to the infant in the woman's arms, her heart hammering with a rhythm that synchronized with Coda's increasingly tense posture. The woman, Olivia, or at least that's what she claimed, rocked the bundled child with robotic repetition, her arms swaying rhythmically, voice humming a lullaby too rehearsed, too detached. But Naomi's focus was no longer on the mother. It was on the child. The blanket had shifted during the scuffle, revealing a sliver of pale skin, a fragile neck that remained still, unnervingly still. No twitch, no startle, no flicker. Not when Coda had barked inches away. Not when the crowd gasped. Not when the woman had nearly fallen. Naomi leaned in, her breath catching as she whispered, Emma? The name felt wrong, foreign on her tongue, like it didn't belong to the child or the moment. There was no response. Not a flinch, not even the reflexive curl most infants would make at sudden stimuli. The baby's lips were faintly blue, her chest rising and falling in shallow, slow motion. But her expression remained completely unaltered. A plastic stillness, a silence deeper than sleep. Naomi's instincts sharpened. Coda had stopped barking. He stood now in perfect stillness, but not passivity. He placed himself directly between Olivia and the baby, cutting the line of contact in a deliberate, calculated move. Naomi's breath hitched. She recognized that stance. It was one of Coda's most advanced conditioned behaviors, reserved for the rarest of scenarios. A protection override used only when Coda identified the adult as a source of potential harm to a child. The posture wasn't aggressive, no bared teeth, no low growls, but it was immovable. His weight shifted forward, shoulders square, eyes locked on Olivia. Naomi's thoughts raced. Coda didn't get confused, not ever. And this behavior, she had only seen it once before, during a case so disturbing that she'd tried for years to push it from her memory. It hadn't worked. You need paramedics, Naomi spoke softly into her radio mic, keeping her tone calm as she maintained eye contact with Olivia, whose gaze now darted rapidly around the terminal, scanning for exits again. We're going to get her checked out just to be sure. Olivia clutched the baby tighter. She's fine, just tired. It's been a long day. I told you she sleeps deeply. Naomi stepped forward. He's okay, but I just want to make sure she's safe. You want that too, right? Olivia's hands trembled, just slightly, her fingers flexing against the fleece blanket as if she were trying to hold onto something that was already slipping away. Naomi continued, We've got a medical team just down the corridor. They'll take a quick look. No big deal. That's not necessary, Olivia snapped, but her voice cracked midway. You don't need to touch her. Coda growled. Not the bark, not the warning, but the low, guttural sound that came from a place older than training, older than logic. Naomi knew that growl. It came from trust, from memory, from something primal that had never steered her wrong. She crouched again, this time leveling her eyes with Koda's, grounding herself in the only anchor she trusted in this storm of uncertainty. "You smell something, don't you, boy?" Koda's ears twitched. He didn't break posture, he just stayed between. Olivia looked down at the dog, then up at Naomi. "This is insane. You're letting a dog dictate airport security protocol now." "You'd be surprised how often he's right," Naomi replied, her voice calm. Behind them, Martinez returned with 2 paramedics. Both young but alert, their medical bags already open. Olivia's eyes widened. "No, absolutely not. You can't just—" "We're not doing anything without your cooperation," Naomi said. "But if this child is in distress and we don't intervene, then you and I both know that would be neglect." "She's not in distress," Olivia barked. "She's asleep." But Naomi didn't need to argue anymore. The paramedics had seen it now too. The unnatural pallor, the lack of muscular tension, the absence of response to even the most basic verbal stimuli. "Her vitals are shallow," one paramedic murmured, slipping on gloves as she carefully reached for the infant's wrist. "She needs a full evaluation step." His teeth did not flash, his voice did not rise, but the intensity in his gaze deepened to something that felt human, almost protective, disbelieving, as if asking, "How could you do this?" "Ma'am," the second paramedic said firmly, "we're going to take the baby now. Please release her." Olivia didn't move. Her arms tightened again. "Don't," she whispered. "You'll take him away from me." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Him?" Olivia blinked hard. She corrected. "I meant her." The 2 paramedics exchanged a glance. Naomi's stomach coiled. Something was unraveling, something long buried in "Matt," Naomi said softly, "I need you to let go. We're not here to hurt anyone. But if this child isn't treated immediately, we might lose her." The word "lose" hung in the air like a live wire. Olivia froze. Her breath hitched. Her grip loosened. Naomi stepped forward, hands steady, arms open, not reaching, just ready. The paramedics moved swiftly, gently lifting the infant from Olivia's arms, as Koda stood like a marble statue, never blinked. The baby's body sagged unnaturally in the medic's hands, her head lolling slightly, lips tinged violet beneath the overhead fluorescence. "Respiratory rate is dangerously low," the paramedic muttered. "We need oxygen now." Naomi barely registered the medical rush. Her attention was fixed on Olivia, who had sunk to the floor, muttering softly to herself, arms empty, swaying slightly. "He'll find her," she whispered. He said she would remember." Naomi's blood ran cold. The language wasn't that of a grieving mother, it was someone repeating instructions, indoctrinated lines. She reached for her radio. "This is Green. We have a potential abduction. I need full identification protocol. We may be looking at a larger situation." Koda moved, finally. His protective posture relaxed as he followed the paramedics with the baby down the hall, glancing once over his shoulder as if confirming Naomi was with him. She was. She always would be. But her eyes were on Olivia, whose expression had shifted from panic to vacancy. The woman was no longer trying to flee, nor trying to lie. She was lost inside herself, rocking slightly in rhythm, hands moving to an invisible lullaby. Naomi stepped closer, crouched low. "Who told you she was yours?" she asked softly. Olivia blinked up at her, and in a moment of terrifying clarity, she smiled. He said, "She was my second chance." The fluorescent lights above cast a harsh, sterile glow over the corridor, as Naomi followed close behind the paramedics, wheeling the infant toward the on-site medical station. Koda paced beside her, his gait composed yet tense, occasionally glancing back over his shoulder as if ensuring no danger trailed behind. Behind them, 2 security officers gently lifted the woman, now identifying herself as Claire Abbott, from the floor where she had collapsed moments earlier, her expression still floating in that dangerous limbo between reality and delusion. Naomi kept her pace steady, but her mind moved at full sprint. A child rendered motionless through sedation, a woman with a rehearsed story that unraveled with every breath. And Koda's unmistakable alert, something about all of it screamed premeditation. Inside the security office, the sterile calm returned, but Naomi's unease did not subside. She stood across from Claire, who now sat upright in the holding chair, coat draped around her, arms crossed protectively, face locked in that brittle calm that always preceded either collapse or confrontation. Naomi laid her badge on the desk, not for show but as a silent signal of formality. "I'd like to verify your identification," she said evenly. "Yours and the child's." Claire blinked. "I told you everything is in my checked luggage. The airline told me I didn't need to keep the baby's documents on me because she's under one." Naomi didn't move. "That's not how it works, ma'am. Infants under 2 can travel on a parent's lap, yes. But proper identification is still mandatory, especially for domestic to international transfers like the one you claimed." Claire's fingers flexed against the armrest. "Well, I misunderstood," she snapped too quickly. "It's been a stressful day. I packed in a rush. I wasn't thinking straight." Naomi nodded slowly. "Let's talk about your flight then. You said you were on Delta 264 to Portland, right?" Claire didn't answer immediately. Her eyes narrowed, trying to calculate. "Yes," she finally said, "that's what I booked." Naomi tapped her radio and turned slightly toward the computer terminal behind the desk. "Control, this is Green. Can you confirm the current manifest for Delta 264? A pause crackled through the comms before a voice responded. "Green, that flight's been canceled since 9:04 this morning. Snowstorm grounded it before boarding began. No passengers loaded." Naomi turned back toward Claire, letting the silence stretch. Claire shifted in her seat. "Oh, I meant United 918. I must have mixed them up. I've had to change flights 3 times today. Everything's blending together." Naomi typed a new query. "Let's see." The system loaded slowly, every second dragging through the room like razor wire. "United 918, she said aloud, reading the screen. "Doesn't exist. Not at this airport, not today." Claire flinched. It was subtle, a millisecond crack in her perfectly posed confusion. Naomi leaned forward, not aggressively but with that slow, practiced pressure that disarmed even seasoned liars. "You want to try again?" Claire's lips parted, but no words came out. Naomi folded her arms. "You see, the thing is, you're not just having a bad day. You're making up a story that's starting to trip over itself. That baby," she said, voice tightening, "could have died. So either you don't understand what you've done, or you do, and that's a much bigger problem." Claire sat frozen. Then, quietly, she said, "Her name is Emily." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Earlier you said Hannah, then Emma." Claire blinked fast, the way someone does when trying to stop themselves from saying more. Naomi stepped closer. "What's her real name?" I don't know." Claire finally exhaled. "She didn't have one when I found her." The room chilled. Naomi stared at her, no longer pretending to hold back. "You found her where?" Claire looked away, her eyes darting toward the wall, then the floor. "In a grocery parking lot. She was just there, alone. No one was helping her." Naomi's voice was steady but sharp now. "When did this happen?" 2 days ago," Claire whispered. "In Red Bluff. There were no cameras. No one saw." "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to." She trailed off. Her hands trembled in her lap. Naomi turned away, masking the fire building in her chest. Coda, lying by the door, let out a low exhale, his head rising slightly, ears rotating forward like a radar locked on subtle frequencies. Naomi moved toward the computer again, accessing passenger logs. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting the supposed name Claire Abbott. A list popped up. 3 domestic flights in the past month, no international, no checked-in infant on any record, no match for a dependent. Naomi scrolled further, cross-referencing identification numbers. But a red flag popped instantly. Claire Abbott's listed ID had been reported stolen 3 weeks earlier in Kansas City. She turned back around slowly. "Ma'am, your identification is invalid. It was reported stolen." Claire stared at her. For a moment, the composure returned. "No, that's impossible." Naomi didn't blink. "What's your real name?" Claire's jaw clenched. "I don't know who you think I am, but I..." Naomi raised a hand. "Let me rephrase. Who gave you that ID?" Silence. Then a whisper. "He said it would work, that no one would check if I acted natural." Naomi's pulse kicked. "He? Who?" "The man who helped me get to her. Who told me I deserved a second chance." Outside the glass door, the hallway remained quiet, but the tension inside the room grew heavier with every passing second. Naomi crossed the room, retrieved a water bottle from the mini-fridge, and set it gently on the desk near Claire's hand. "Tell me about this man." Claire's eyes lifted slowly. "He's a doctor, a good one. He's helped women like me, ones who've lost everything." "Nathan," she said. "Dr. Nathan Langford." Naomi felt the name land like cold metal in her gut. She had heard that name before, in passing years ago, but never connected to anything good, never connected to children. Kota stood, his body stiffening. Naomi saw it, that same subtle warning, just the beginning of it. She tapped her earpiece again. "Dispatch, I need background on a Nathan Langford, possibly licensed as a psychologist or psychiatrist. Check records from Texas and Colorado." "Copy that," came the reply. Claire's eyes followed Naomi as if she were watching the ground crumble beneath her. "I didn't hurt her," she said. "He told me to keep her quiet, that it was just something to help her sleep." Naomi looked at her. "Did he give you the drug?" Claire nodded. "He said it was harmless, just baby Benadryl. He gave me the dose. In a syringe?" "No, he gave me tablets. I crushed them, mixed it with milk." Naomi exhaled slowly. It was reckless, dangerous, and it explained the respiratory suppression. She leaned on the desk, voice lowering. "Why you, Claire?" Claire's smile was tragic. "Because he said I was strong, that I'd proven I was ready, that I was a mother, even if no one else saw." Naomi didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stepped out into the hallway, Kota following silently. She crouched next to him, one hand resting on his shoulder, grounding herself in the warmth of his trust. "She's not the only one, is she?" she murmured. Kota looked toward the medical wing, then ever so slowly toward the security entrance. Naomi followed his gaze. Her radio crackled. "Green, we found a secondary ID match on Langford, and you're going to want to see this." Naomi stood still in the dim corridor, the voice on her radio still buzzing with preliminary results about Nathan Langford. But her mind wasn't on the report anymore. Her gaze drifted to Kota, who stood by her left leg, silent now but alert, head tilted slightly to the side as though listening to something beyond what she could hear. It wasn't just instinct, it was memory. A rhythm. A pattern. The same 3-bark alert. She had heard it before. 2 years ago, in an abandoned schoolhouse on the outskirts of Riyadh, during the UN counter-human trafficking operation. That mission hadn't been part of airport patrol or civilian security. It was war-adjacent, buried beneath headlines and sealed files. Naomi had been attached to the Tactical Liaison Unit, working alongside international forces to extract local children caught in extremist zones. Kota had just been reassigned to her then, barely 2 months out of combat deployment in Afghanistan. Most handlers refused to take him on. They said he was broken, that he reacted to shadows, that he wouldn't pass standard behavioral exams. Naomi had taken him in because he didn't growl at her, even when she didn't speak. He just watched her, as though measuring the contents of her silence. She remembered that day with surgical clarity. The call came from a local informant. Suspicious activity near a collapsed safe house used by rebels. Naomi entered first, rifle raised, eyes darting over the shredded walls and soot back-ended floor. It was Kota who led them deeper in, past debris and piles of cloth that used to be curtains, until they reached the remains of a back classroom. The scene was unspeakable. A young woman's body lay curled against the wall, her arms locked in what had once been a protective embrace over a tiny girl no older than 3. Kota didn't bark then. He whimpered, crawled forward with slow steps and gently pressed his nose to the girl's face. She blinked, barely, alive, sedated but alive. Naomi remembered dropping her weapon and sprinting forward, scooping the child up, heart racing, shouting coordinates into her comms as Kota stood over the mother's body, unmoving, eyes dark with something she hadn't yet learned to name. The girl survived, was returned to a refugee processing camp 3 days later. Naomi never saw her again, but Kota had changed. From that day forward, his alert system became precise, specific, not just to smells but to relationships. Tension, threat proximity. He didn't just detect bombs or drugs. He detected dissonance, emotional violence, and once he identified a child in danger, no amount of distraction or command could override his protection instinct. Now in this corridor, Naomi realized she had heard the same 3-bark cadence today that she had heard in Riyadh. It was the exact rhythm, not random, not excited, but patterned, methodical. as if warning not just of danger but of betrayal. And she had ignored it, again. 2 years ago she had hesitated too. At a bus terminal near El Paso, Coda had gone into alert stance near a teenage girl holding a toddler. Naomi had assumed fatigue, dehydration, told Coda to heal. The girl vanished 10 minutes later, found days later across the border, drugged, and the toddler gone. The pain of that failure had gnawed at Naomi since then, more than any bullet or field wound. And now, Coda had done it again, sounded the same alarm, the same tempo, the same sense of rising insistence. And she had hesitated, if only briefly, unsure whether to trust him or the logical veneer of a well-dressed woman with a fake identity. Naomi crouched slowly, her knees creaking in the silence, and met Coda's gaze. "I heard it this time," she whispered. Coda didn't move, just looked at her and blinking. "Absolute. We won't miss again." Her radio chimed. "Lieutenant Green, this is Control. Langford was indeed licensed in Colorado, had multiple complaints filed against him, patient manipulation, off-record consultations, prescribing without documentation. His license was suspended 2 months ago. We're compiling a full file now. Want us to forward to your terminal." Naomi stood, fingers tightening around the radio. "And initiate a search of medical housing facilities near the city. He may be using patient shelters to move children." "Copy." She turned back toward the security office. Claire, or whatever her real name was, sat now with her head in her hands, fingers clutching her scalp, elbows on her knees. The bottle of water Naomi had offered earlier remained unopened. Martinez was inside, watching her. Uncertain whether she would speak again, Naomi entered and closed the door gently behind her. "Let's talk about Langford," she said. Claire didn't look up. "You don't understand. He helps people. Not everyone wants to forget their children. Some of us want them back." Naomi's voice dropped. "Do you know how many women he's helped remember children that were never theirs to begin with?" Claire flinched. Naomi continued, her tone low but steady. "He tells you you're broken, and then he gives you a map to recovery, just so long as you follow his script." Claire's breathing hitched. "I saw her picture. He showed me, said she was mine, that they lied to me in the hospital, that the papers were forged." "That's what he does," Naomi replied. "He finds your loss and reshapes it. He doesn't heal you, he weaponizes you." Claire's eyes filled with something like understanding, but too late. The damage was already done. Outside, Coda sat facing the window, but he wasn't watching the hallway anymore. His ears had shifted, nose angled toward the west corridor, the direction of the airport's private medical access wing. Naomi noticed it at once. The subtle rise in his spine, the tail lowered but tense, the breath held in that coiled anticipation she had learned to never ignore. He barked once, then again, the rhythm. Identical. Naomi froze. She turned slowly, tracking Coda's gaze. Someone was approaching. Not Olivia, not a guard. A man, tan coat, neatly trimmed beard, carrying a clipboard, moving with a doctor's confidence and an actor's poise. Naomi didn't know how she knew, but she knew. Her hand went instinctively to her radio. "This is Green. I need backup at West Hall Medical Access now." Naomi reached the emergency wing seconds after Coda's third bark shattered the hush of the corridor, her pulse keeping pace with her boots as they struck the linoleum floor. She saw the man, Langford, or someone impersonating a physician, step around the corner just as 2 uniformed officers converged from the opposite side. He didn't run. Instead, he raised both hands slowly, a calm expression on his face, his eyes gliding over the approaching team like a man used to being ordered. "Is there a problem?" he asked smoothly, his voice laced with practiced authority. Naomi didn't bother with pleasantries. "ID," she demanded. He produced a lanyard with a Rainford medical badge clipped to his chest, the name Gallagher's Chambers clearly printed. Naomi examined it without touching. "You're not cleared for pediatric access today, Dr. Chambers." The man tilted his head, offering a gentle smile. "I'm consulting. I was asked by the attending physician to observe the child's recovery. You'll find my credentials valid." Naomi didn't blink. "Funny. That child is under security review, and your name wasn't on the access list." One of the officers stepped in. "Sir, you'll need to come with us." The man exhaled, slow and theatrical, as though he were the victim of a misunderstanding. But Naomi saw the tightening of his jaw, the slight twitch in the fingers of his right hand. The weight shift, subtle but telling. At that moment, a nurse burst through the double doors of the infant care wing. "Lieutenant Green," she called, urgency cracking her voice. "You need to see this, it's about the baby." Naomi nodded sharply to the officers. "Hold him here." Then she followed the nurse into the sterile, low-lit treatment room, where 2 paramedics and an attending ER doctor stood gathered around the infant, who now lay inside a plexiglass-walled neonatal unit. Monitors clipped gently to her toes and chest. Coda entered behind her, his posture no longer confrontational but watchful, ears turning slowly with every beep of the equipment. Naomi approached the doctor. "Talk to me." The doctor, a seasoned woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her hair and sharp eyes behind her glasses, gestured to the screen. "Vitals are stabilizing. We reversed the suppression, but had we not intervened when we did, the results could have been fatal." Naomi nodded. "Was it trauma? Illness?" The doctor shook her head. "Chemical sedation." Naomi's gut clenched. "Meaning?" "The child was drugged," the doctor clarified, adjusting her gloves as she reached for a tablet. Deliberately, enough to depress her respiratory rate and reduce all reflexive activity. It was calibrated. This wasn't accidental. Naomi looked at the infant, tiny chest rising and falling slowly, cheeks still too pale. Use? The doctor lifted the tablet. "We found trace residues at the injection site, nape of the neck, most likely administered via syringe or dermal jet injector. Based on the chemistry, it's a concentrated form of diphenhydramine, over the azon name Benadryl. But this was no regular dosage. It had been altered." "Altered how?" "The formulation had additives to delay absorption and extend effect. It mimics what you'd see in film productions, actors pretending to be asleep, barely breathing, but alive. It's rare, not something you'd find in a household." Naomi felt the air grow colder. So someone wanted this baby to appear unconscious but stable, not hurt, just asleep, like a doll for protection. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. "Can you estimate when it was administered?" "Roughly 5 hours ago based on her metabolic response." Nay opened her eyes. "That would place it before she even entered the airport." The doctor nodded. "Correct." Naomi exhaled, the weight in her chest thickening. "How's her neurological response?" "Too early to say, but we're hopeful." She responded mildly to deep stimuli during the transfer. "Her vitals are climbing slowly. We're up." Naomi turned back toward the door where Coda stood like a sentinel. She knelt beside him, brushing a hand along his collar. "You felt this?" she murmured. "Before anyone knew." Coda leaned slightly against her. No sound, no bark, just presence. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. One of the officers stepped inside. "Lieutenant," the man from the hallway Langford. "He's insisting on speaking with you. Says he has information." Naomi stood slowly. "Does he know we've identified the sedation?" "No, ma'am." "Keep it that way. Is he secured?" "Yes." "In interview room 2? Naomi nodded. "I'll handle it." She took one last look at the baby in the isolette, then turned to Coda. "Let's see how deep this lie goes." Minutes later, she entered the interview room to find Nathan Langford seated calmly, fingers steepled beneath his chin. His posture was perfect, his eyes unreadable. The fake ID had already been confiscated and lay on the table beside a preliminary folder containing his background, a mixture of half-truths and shell identities. Naomi remained standing. "You used to work in psychiatric care," she began, "until your license was suspended." "That was politics," Langford replied. "When you challenge certain systems, they retaliate." "And what system were you challenging by drugging an infant?" His smile was tight. "You misunderstand me, Lieutenant. I didn't harm that child, I protected her. From the people who stole her from her rightful mother." "Claire Abbott?" Naomi scoffed. "That woman's name isn't even real." "Names are irrelevant," Langford replied, eyes darkening. "What matters is the bond between mother and child, a bond that should never have been broken. I help restore what others erase." Naomi stepped closer. "What about the medication? The injection site, the synthetic blend? That's not restoration. That's orchestration." Langford tilted his head. "Would you rather the child screamed in fear, cried and alerted airport staff. What I provided was a humane transition. Calm, controlled. Naomi clenched her jaw. You turned her into a prop. A breathing decoy. No, he said, calm slipping into intensity. You gave her back to someone who needed her more than the system ever will. Naomi leaned over the table. And who else have you given back? Langford remained silent. Naomi reached into her folder and pulled out the preliminary map of travel records. You've flown 5 times in the last 2 months. Each time with a different woman. Each time under a different alias. Each one of them had lost a child in the last year. You targeted them. I gave them purpose, he snapped. You gave them stolen children. Naomi shot back. And you gave this one enough diphenhydramine to kill her. Langford's face twisted slightly. She survived, didn't she? Barely, Naomi said. If we hadn't intervened, she'd be in a more not in recovery. At that moment, her radio buzzed again. Lieutenant, this is ER. The child just woke up, responding to her name, Sophia Mills. Her mother's en route. Naomi froze. Her hand gripped the edge of the table. The name Sophia. Claire had never used it, neither had Langford. But somehow the child remembered. The name Sophia Mills echoed through Naomi's earpiece like a whispered revelation. As she stood motionless in the interview room, her gaze locked on the man sitting across from her, who no longer smiled, no longer blinked, no longer pretended. Dr. Nathan Langford leaned back in his chair. The veneer of professionalism stripped clean, replaced now by a silence that screamed calculation. Sophia? She repeated aloud, her voice low as if testing the truth herself. That baby has a name, a family. She's not yours to assign, not a symbol, not a surrogate for someone lost. She's someone's daughter. Langford's face flickered then, barely perceptible, but Naomi saw it. A crease near his left brow, a momentary downturn of his mouth. Recognition, perhaps, or regret. She wasn't sure which, and she didn't care. She stepped back from the table. You said she was returned to someone who needed her more? You meant Olivia, didn't you? Langford didn't answer. Naomi didn't wait. She turned to the door. Interview's over. Keep him here. I need background on Olivia Maris Crossolia ships, already in progress. A voice replied in her comms. By the time Naomi reached the adjacent security office, Martinez had a file waiting, projected across the wall screen with all the sterile bluntness of bureaucratic truth. Oliver Maris, 34, former kindergarten teacher, admitted twice to Lakewood Psychiatric Facility. Primary diagnosis, postpartum psychosis, secondary grief dissociative identity symptoms. Admittance date 1 year ago. Discharged 3 months prior, conditional, under outpatient supervision. Notably, Olivia's son Charlie Maris died from sudden infant death syndrome at 4 months old. Date of death, 8 months ago. Naomi nodded slowly. Langford knew that. He played the timeline. She scanned further. Look at this, progress notes. Final sessions logged by Langford himself. He was working at Lakewood under contract during her inpatient phase. So he wasn't just involved, Martinez said grimly. He was her primary therapist. Naomi exhaled, eyes locking onto a specific notation buried deep in the text. Subject expresses persistent belief her child is not deceased. Believes the body shown was not Charlie. Shows signs of trauma imprint but susceptible to reparenting narrative if guided carefully. Reparenting narrative? Naomi repeated aloud, a short breath from his place near the doorway. Sensing the shift in tension, Naomi's chest tightened as pieces of the puzzle clicked together with clinical cruelty. Olivia had never stood a chance. In her most fragile hour, when she needed grounding, she had been handed a fantasy. Fantasy is not just any fantasy, a weaponized one. She paced as she reviewed audio logs attached to the report. In one, Olivia's voice trembled through static. Sometimes I think I hear him crying, but then the sound fades like it's in the walls. Langford's voice responded, calm and coaxing. That's not madness, Olivia. That's memory trying to correct what was stolen from you. You knew your son better than anyone. If your heart says he's alive, maybe it's because another file. Olivia, they told me he died in his sleep, but I saw his eyes in that baby at the market. She looked at me like she remembered. Langford, recognition happens between souls, not just blood. Don't ignore what you know. Naomi slammed her palm lightly against the desk. He planted it, every thought, every justification. Step by step. He didn't just push her to take a child, he built the story brick by brick until she believed it was her own. Behind her, Kota stood, his body angling again toward the window. Naomi followed his gaze, knowing his cues now as well as her own. In the far medical hallway, behind the glass, she saw Olivia, her real name now confirmed, sitting beside Sophia's hospital crib. She wasn't trying to touch the child. She wasn't screaming or resisting. She just sat there, motionless, her eyes red-rimmed, her shoulders slumped inward, a woman hollowed out by a truth too heavy to carry and a lie too cruel to let go. Naomi entered the observation wing and stepped quietly inside. Olivia didn't look up. Naomi didn't speak immediately. She just sat beside her, the room silent except for the gentle beeping of Sophia's monitors and the occasional whoosh of the oxygen valve. After a minute, Olivia whispered, "She woke up." Naomi nodded. She did. And she called out for her mother. Olivia's fingers twitched. Her real one. Naomi didn't answer that. She waited. Olivia turned her face toward the crib. "I don't remember when I stopped being me. When I started being the woman he said I was." Her voice cracked. "He told me mothers know, that I had to trust my instinct, not the papers, not the doctors." Naomi's tone was gentle. "And did your instinct tell you she was yours?" Olivia's chin trembled. "At first, yes. Because I needed her to be. Because the silence in my apartment, in my chest, it got too loud." She glanced at Naomi, but then I saw her breathe just now, and it wasn't his breath. It wasn't Charlie's. It was hers. Her voice fell into a whisper. "I didn't know her at all." Naomi sat back, the ache in her chest heavier than before. Not from anger. From mourning, not just for Sophia's stolen hours, but for Olivia's stolen reality. A grief twisted into obsession, then weaponized by a man who called it healing. "Langford is going away for a long time," Naomi said softly. "He can't hurt anyone else." Olivia nodded. "He already did." She leaned forward, her forehead against the glass of the crib. "He didn't take my baby, but he took my grief and turned it into something monstrous." Naomi reached out, resting a steady hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Grief doesn't make you a monster. Believing a lie doesn't either. What matters is what you do with the truth when it finally shows up." From the doorway, a soft knock broke the moment. A nurse stepped in. "Lieutenant, the child's mother just arrived." Naomi rose slowly. Olivia didn't move. "Do you want to be here?" Naomi asked. Olivia shook her head. "No. She doesn't need to remember me. She needs her mother." Naomi lingered for a second longer, before leaving the room, stepping out into the corridor just as the elevator doors opened, and a woman burst through, her eyes frantic, a photo clutched in her trembling hand. "Sophia?" she gasped. Naomi nodded and gestured toward the glass. "She's waiting." But before Naomi could turn to escort her, Kota suddenly shifted again, this time facing the opposite hallway, tail rigid, ears up, body locked in high alert. Naomi's heart caught. "What is it, boy?" Cantled out Noah, precise, the first alert bark she hadn't heard all day. She followed his line of sight and saw a hospital volunteer walking briskly away from the infant wing, clipboard in hand, hoodie drawn tight, a bulge under the jacket that didn't fit the shape of anything medical. The moment Naomi turned toward the volunteer moving briskly down the corridor, she felt Kota's presence beside her shift from alert to pursuit mode. His stance became taut, his body lowering slightly, and the low growl vibrating in his chest deepened into the familiar three-bark rhythm that had become her signal to drop everything else. "Security!" Naomi snapped into her radio. "Lockdown pediatric corridor D, we have a breach, suspect disguised as hospital personnel, heading northbound from neonatal unit." The man ahead stiffened, sensing the change behind him, and broke into a sprint. Naomi didn't hesitate. "Kota, go!" she commanded, and the shepherd launched forward, weaving effortlessly through a trap of rolling carts, startled staff, and onlookers with frozen hands and wide eyes. Naomi sprinted behind him, heart pounding, eyes locked on the man's movements as he ducked around a corner near the stairwell. But Kota was faster. When she turned the corner seconds later, she found him already in position, body stretched across the stairwell landing, blocking the man's escape, lips parted in a warning snarl that stopped the intruder mid-step. "Hands up," Naomi shouted, her weapon drawn, her badge raised. The man, young, jittery, face half hidden beneath the volunteer's hood, slowly lifted his arms. "I wasn't stealing anything," he blurted, voice high and strained. "I'm just a med student, I got lost." "You're carrying a sample kit," Naomi pointed out, stepping forward. Eyes sharp. "What were you planning to do with it?" He stammered, backing slightly, but one of the backup officers arrived and quickly restrained him, recovering the bag slung across his shoulder. Inside, Naomi found a sealed vial still capped and a cotton swab soaked in a clear preservative solution. "That's not hospital solution," she muttered, examining the label which had been removed with precision. "You were trying to get DNA." The man remained silent, his lips pressed together now in stubborn fear. Naomi studied him. "Didn't he?" No answer, just the tiniest flicker of recognition in his eyes. Before he looked away. Back in the observation room, Naomi placed the vial in an evidence bag and sat heavily, Coda beside her, still bristling slightly. She reviewed the hospital's internal camera feed from earlier that day, starting from the moment Langford, posing as Jar Chambers, had entered the wing. The footage wasn't grainy. Rainford was a top-tier medical facility, and their security systems were recent, sharp, and unforgiving. Naomi fast-forwarded through the hallway shots, watching Langford move with disturbing calm, his ID badge swinging naturally, his interactions polite but detached. He stopped at the nurse's station, nodded, signed a fake log, then moved toward the infant unit. Naomi slowed the footage as he paused at the door. There it was, frame by frame. His hand dipped briefly into his coat pocket, retrieved a small, translucent vial, and slipped it under his clipboard. Another second passed, and he opened the door to Sophia's room. Naomi's gut twisted. He had tried to get to the child again. She rewound the tape and zoomed in on the angle where he entered. Coda had barked the moment Langford approached, that same distinct rhythm, the sound that no one but Naomi understood anymore. It hadn't been coincidence. The pattern was precise. 3 barks, 4 seconds apart. Just like when he first saw Olivia. Naomi remembered her training manual from the early K-9 sessions. Pattern recognition in behavioral response was often overlooked in trauma-bonded dogs, but not in... He didn't just respond to scent or fear. He responded to imbalance, to manipulation, to concealed intent. Langford didn't flinch in the footage. He moved slowly toward the crib, his eyes blank, his mouth forming words Naomi couldn't hear but could guess. A nurse entered shortly after, and Langford turned with that same polished poise, nodded and exited. But as he turned, Naomi spotted something critical. His fingers reached down and brushed the edge of Sophia's blanket, not as a physician, but with clinical purpose. She zoomed in further, watching him slide the corner of the blanket aside, glanced at the child's neck, then withdraw his hand quickly. Her radio crackled again. "Lieutenant Green, lab confirmed the contents of the swab you found match epithelial samples consistent with buccal DNA testing." He was attempting a non-consensual DNA harvest. Naomi stared at the paused frame on the screen. He wanted proof. She muttered. He needed to convince Olivia, or himself, or someone else, that Sophia was the reincarnation of Charlie, that the narrative he sold wasn't just psychological. He was trying to turn belief into science. Martinez entered, handing her another document. "Background check on the kid you just caught. His name's Ryan Elkins, 24, med school dropout. He's been flagged once before for accessing patient records without clearance. Guess where he interned last spring?" Naomi glanced down. "Lakewood," she said. "Langford recruited him. He's not acting alone." She paced the room, Coda shadowing her steps. Langford didn't just manipulate women. He built a network. Recruited people who believed in his fantasy, turned his delusion into doctrine. Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You think it's a cult?" Naomi nodded. "It's a system, a belief system disguised as therapy. Each step reinforced by people like Elkins, each doubt erased by proof. The drug, the stories, the DNA. He needed that sample to keep the lie alive." She turned toward the glass wall of the infant unit again. Sophia lay calm now, her breathing steady, her tiny fingers curled around the edge of her blanket. Outside the room, her mother, Claire Mills, Olivia's real sister, stood trembling, watching, waiting for the green light to re-enter her daughter's world. Naomi stepped closer to the glass, her reflection merging briefly with Claire's, as though the two women were tethered by the thin pane between them. Would have taken her again, Naomi said softly. Even behind bars. He was still trying. Martinez crossed his arms. So what's the move now? Naomi turned, her expression solidifying into something resolute. We prove intent. We expose the system. We show this isn't just a mistake, it's a structure designed to break women and reshape children into symbols. Kota whined softly, drawing Naomi's attention back. He stood now facing the opposite wall, ears cocked toward the hospital's underground level. Naomi followed his stance. What is it? She murmured. Kota moved toward the hallway slowly, tail down. Steps careful. Martinez looked up. Something else? Naomi nodded. He's not finished. She followed Kota into the corridor, her hand drifting toward her sidearm again. As they approached the elevator, her phone buzzed with a message from the unit at Langford's residence. Search completed. Basement locked room located. Signs of child care occupied rooms. Naomi froze. He had a backup plan, she whispered. A place to hide someone. Maybe Sophia wasn't his only target. The address came through encrypted lines. A nondescript warehouse lot on the industrial edge of Rainford, tucked between an abandoned textile plant and a mile-long stretch of derelict train tracks. Naomi arrived with the tactical unit at dusk, the sky bleeding purple across the horizon as floodlights flickered to life above the loading bay. Kota stepped out of the SUV first, his nose in the air, body taut with anticipation. The warehouse looked abandoned. Rusted padlocks, boarded windows, graffiti tracing decades of silence. But the search warrant, freshly signed and sealed, told a different story. Behind those walls, Langford had been hiding more than a fantasy. He had been building infrastructure. Martinez met her at the gate, holding a crowbar in one hand and the case file in the other. No surveillance, he said. Utilities listed for over 5 years. But power's running. Someone's paying for it off good. Naomi nodded. Let's breach. The tactical team fanned out, securing perimeters before forcing the side entrance open with a mechanical hiss. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. The air was sterile, faintly tinged with antiseptic and completely devoid of the dust and decay one would expect from a building supposedly forgotten. Naomi stepped into the corridor first, flashlights sweeping across matte white walls and vinyl floors that gleamed with recent polishing. Kota moved ahead of her, his pace slow, precise, each paw step placed with the caution of memory. They passed the first 2 rooms, empty, lined with metal shelves filled with unmarked storage bins, until they reached the third, a steel door with a biometric panel, recently dismantled, the wires still warm. Martinez approached with the bolt cutter and pried the door open. What they saw inside stopped everyone. The room stretched 30 feet deep, 20 across, lined on every wall with photos, charts, and documents pinned meticulously in place with surgical precision. Each section of the wall bore a title, handwritten on aged craft paper. Attachment phase, identity realignment, final transition. Beneath them were profiles of women, names, birth dates, psychiatric histories, trauma triggers, lost timelines, and beneath each profile a child's photograph, age and name scrawled in red mark. Naomi moved slowly along the wall, each profile feeling like a scream without sound. She paused in front of one labeled Candidate 9-0, Maris Viability High. Under it, a printed image of Sophia as a newborn, digitally aged month by month, accompanied by comments in Langford's handwriting. Matches ideal visual imprint, psychological resonance strong. Mother believes reincarnation narrative. Next step, ritual integration. Martinez exhaled sharply. What the hell is this? Naomi didn't answer. She stepped closer to a second profile. Candidate 12R, Weaver case failed, subject terminated at transition attempt. Blame redirected to system. Mother remains institutionalized. Beneath it, a picture of a pale infant. Name blurred. Naomi's throat clenched. He kept records, she whispered, of every child he tried to assign. Every woman he broke. Kota gave a low whine, moving toward a door on the far end of the room. Naomi followed, her fingers hovering near her sidearm. Though she didn't expect violence here, she expected something worse. The door creaked open to reveal a room that mimicked a nursery in every detail, except for the feeling it gave. The walls were painted soft cream with stenciled stars. a mobile of plastic moons hanging above a cherrywood crib. A rocking chair stood in the corner beside a side table stacked with children's books, all brand new. A white noise machine played lullabies through dusty speakers in a slow, looping rhythm. But everything was too perfect, too unused, too staged. Naomi stepped inside, her boots clicking against the spotless laminate floor. "This is a set," she said aloud, "not a home, a simulation." Martinez examined the wall behind the crib and pulled back a panel, revealing a built-in monitor with a camera lens pointed directly at the sleeping space. He was recording interactions, he said, training them, letting the women come here play out the fantasy. Naomi knelt beside the chair and found a journal, thin, leather-bound Langford's initials embossed in gold. She flipped through the pages. "Session logs," she muttered. "They document role-playing, reinforcement loops, exposure therapy, except instead of healing trauma, he was using it to reinforce delusions." Coda stood at the foot of the crib, his body still, then suddenly let out a short, sharp bark. Naomi turned immediately, following his gaze toward the closet door. She approached cautiously, hand on her weapon, and opened it slowly. Inside was a series of VR headsets, each labeled with initials that matched the profiles on the wall. A portable projector sat nearby with cables coiled neatly. On the shelf above, a stack of USB drives marked Memory Scripting Phase 1-4. Naomi took one of them and handed it to Martinez. "Have tech scrub it. I want every frame extracted." Martinez nodded, slipping the drive into a bag. Naomi exhaled, trying to process the scope of what Langford had constructed. This wasn't improvisation, it's infrastructure. He wasn't just manipulating minds. He was engineering experience, giving them settings, voices, sightlines, every piece of sensory input curated to make the lie feel more real than the truth. Martinez frowned. "And the children?" Naomi looked around the room. Placed, borrowed, maybe stolen, but definitely chosen. He needed them to fit the image, the myth. Coda paced toward the hallway again, tail lifted slightly, nose twitching. Naomi followed him through the warehouse's rear storage area, where a small door led into what seemed like a server room, rows of hard drives humming quietly. On one wall, a whiteboard outlined something called MRP v3.4. Naomi stared at the acronym. "Maternal Reclamation Project," she said. "This is his full..." Martinez opened a metal cabinet nearby, revealing laminated floor plans of residential treatment centers across 3 states, each marked with red circles, targeted facilities likely filled with women grieving, vulnerable, isolated. He was building a pipeline, Naomi whispered. From loss to obsession to activation, a second cabinet held shipping records, diapers, baby formula, bassinets, all purchased this time toward a sealed box in the corner. Naomi approached it and cut the tape. Inside were more photos, some of real children, others digitally altered to resemble what certain infants might look like after several months. It was manipulating not just identity, she muttered, but time itself. Martinez opened a crate nearby and found a full-body silicone infant doll, weighted and colored to look almost real, wrapped in a hospital blanket with a forged wristband labeled Baby C. Maris. Naomi froze. "Charlie, the one Olivia lost. He made replicas," Martinez said, his voice low. "For practice or to plant the memory." Naomi's stomach churned. He was rewriting maternal history. Coda suddenly barked again, louder, and ran toward a locked trapdoor near the back wall. Naomi's adrenaline surged as she followed, flashlight beam bouncing. Martinez pried the trap open, revealing a staircase descending into shadow. A faint hum drifted upward, electrical, rhythmic. Naomi looked at Coda, then down the stairs, heart hammering. "There's more," she said. "And we haven't found the last child yet." The stairwell descended into a shallow concrete basement, lit only by the flickering hum of emergency LEDs bolted into the ceiling. And as Naomi's boots struck each step, she felt the walls closing in, not physically, but ideologically, as if she were stepping deeper into a mind that refused to separate madness from purpose. Coda was ahead of her, his steps slow but certain, nostrils twitching at something Naomi couldn't yet detect. Martinez followed behind, his flashlight bouncing off a floor slick with industrial sealant and scuffed with recent boot prints. At the bottom, a final door stood ajar, and beyond it, rows of low, humming servers blinked in rhythmic unison. Naomi stepped inside and found what could only be described as the neural network of Langford's sickness, a digital archive housing hundreds of terabytes, organized with military precision. Martinez found a terminal and booted up the mainframe. Encrypted, but the directory names aren't, he said, scrolling quickly. Mothers 1A through 9C, children Alpha to Omega, phases AD, reintegration folders, genetic cross-X logs. Naomi leaned over his shoulder, scanning rapidly. Search for any reference to recent transfers. Look for keywords like live placement, secure cabin, or final calibration. Martinez typed, then froze. Got something. Phase Delta Ethan. Status, secured. Location, cabin East Pine R27. Supervisor A. Wesley. Clearance, Mitchell alias confirmed. Ethan, a third officer who had been monitoring external communications, burst through the door. Lieutenant, this just came in. Local law enforcement got a missing persons report filed earlier today by a foster mother in Marlowe County. 5-year-old boy. Brown hair, gray eyes. Last seen at an off-site learning center yesterday. They pulled the security footage and identified the adult who picked him up as Andrea Wesley. Nursing student, part-time behavioral aide, same name listed here. Naomi's jaw clenched. Langford's team extracted another child, she straightened. Get us aerial recon on East Pine, secure the perimeter around cabin R27. I want a full entry team on standby. She turned to Coda, who was now staring at the exit, as if he already knew they had no time to waste. Let's go, boy, she said. One more to bring home. The convoy rolled out 20 minutes later under a pale crescent moon, following coordinates that led them deep into the East Piney woods outside Rainford, where road signs thinned and the smell of fresh pine overpowered the scent of asphalt. Naomi sat in the lead SUV, eyes focused, rifle loaded beside her. Coda perched upright in the rear compartment, unmoving. The forest grew denser as they drove, and the GPS pinged a final turn, a narrow gravel path marked only by a rusted mailbox labeled Dr. Mitch. Naomi's stomach turned. Mitchell, she muttered, Langford's alias. The cabin appeared moments later, a single, no sign of distress, no sign of haste. Naomi gave the silent hand signal, and the team dispersed into flanking formation, surrounding the structure. She approached with Coda at her side, weapon raised. Rainford PD, she called out. Step outside with your hands where I can see them. A long pause. Then the door creaked open and a young woman appeared. Early 20s, blonde hair in a bun, wearing scrubs. Her hands lifted in compliance, but her eyes calm to the point of eerie. I'm just the caregiver, she said softly. He told me not to answer unless it was time. Naomi stepped forward, keeping her aim steady. Where's the boy? Ione didn't move. Don't worry about it. Roger, I know. Feli is wonderful at Bethamy's. Naomi lowered her rifle slightly. What's his name? The woman blinked. Ethan, but sometimes he says his name's Andrew. Depends on the day. Naomi exchanged a glance with Martinez. Secure her, she ordered, and 2 officers gently escorted the woman out of the clearing. Naomi stepped inside, Coda moving ahead. The cabin was modest but meticulously kept. Bookshelves lined with educational toys, kitchen spotless, a hallway leading to 2 small bedrooms. Coda paused outside the first door, nose pressed low, then gave a soft whine. Naomi opened it slowly. Inside, under the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a star, a boy sat upright in bed, blankets pulled to his chest, wide gray eyes fixed on her without fear, just observation. Naomi knelt slowly, setting her weapon aside. Hey there, she said gently. My name's Naomi, this is Coda. He's a very good dog. The boy's gaze shifted to Coda, his expression changing slightly, something softening behind the stillness. He's pretty, the boy whispered. Is the nicest. It's good, the boy said, and reached out a tentative hand. Coda stepped forward carefully, lowering his head, allowing the boy to run small fingers along his fur. Do you know your name? Naomi asked. Sometimes I'm Ethan, sometimes Andrew, he said simply. It depends if Dad's hiding me. Naomi blinked slowly. To that a mom before, but he says she forgot. Naomi's throat tightened. Do you remember her? The boy paused. I remember she cried a lot, and she smelled like peppermint. Dr. Mitchell smells like books and medicine. Naomi reached into her vest pocket and pulled out a small photograph, provided earlier by the foster mother, of a woman kneeling beside the boy at a playground, both laughing. "Do you know this person?" she asked. The boy stared, then slowly he nodded. "That's me," he said, "and that's her. She said I was brave when I climbed the slide." Naomi smiled gently. "You are brave, and she's looking for you." The boy looked down at his hands. "Is she mad?" "No," Naomi said. "She's scared, but she loves you a lot." Coda let out a soft whine and placed his paw gently on the edge of the bed. The boy reached out and touched Coda's head. "Can he come with me?" "Of course," Naomi said. "We're going to take you somewhere safe, and Coda will be with you the whole time." As Naomi carried Ethan out into the clearing, wrapped in a soft blanket and flanked by the team, Martinez approached. "We searched the other room. It's a study, full of Langford's notebooks. One of them's marked Ethan the Real Legacy." Naomi nodded grimly. He wasn't just hiding Ethan, he was shaping him. Martinez flipped through one of the files. Langford planned to present Ethan as a recovered child from systemic corruption, to prove the state steals kids and gives them to unfit parents. He was going to use Ethan as proof of a lie. Naomi looked down at the boy now resting against her shoulder, eyes heavy with sleep. "Not anymore," she said. "He's not a weapon. He's a child." Coda walked beside them silently, tail down but wagging gently, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The convoy pulled away from the cabin minutes later, and Naomi sat with Ethan in the back, Coda curled protectively at their feet. The boy dozed lightly, mumbling a dream word Naomi couldn't decipher, but his breathing was steady, his hands relaxed. Outside, the forest passed in shadows, and ahead, Rainford Hospital waited to confirm his identity and reunite him with the woman who had refused to stop searching. Martinez's radio crackled. "Lieutenant, Langford's confession just came through. He acknowledged removing Ethan from the foster system himself. He claims the state lied, that Ethan was rightfully his." "Doesn't get to define right anymore," she said. "That ended tonight." But even as she said it, Coda suddenly raised his head, ears turning sharply, and Naomi followed his line of tension toward the road ahead, where headlights flared from an unmarked sedan parked off the shoulder in the trees. Her hand moved toward her sidearm again. "Pull over," she ordered. "Now." The SUV rolled to a stop just beyond the tree line, its headlights cutting through the haze of early dawn as Naomi stepped out, hand already on her holster, eyes narrowing at the unmarked sedan parked 20 feet ahead. Coda leapt down beside her, posture locked, tail lowered, ears high and turning like twin receivers. Martinez emerged from the second vehicle with 2 additional officers in tow. "Nobody reported backup," he said. Naomi nodded. "They're not ours." As they approached, the driver's door creaked open and a man stepped out slowly, both hands visible. His suit was clean but creased from a long drive, and his badge reel was clipped to his belt. "FBI. Agent Von Keeley," he said calmly, flashing credentials. "I've been tracking Langford's movements across 3 states. I was hoping you'd catch him before he moved again." Naomi exchanged a look with Martinez. "We didn't catch him," she said. "We cracked his foundation. He's already confessed, partially, enough to open everything." Vaughn nodded. "Good, because he didn't just work solo. We've linked 6 caregivers, 3 institutional insiders, and a digital network he called the Archway, where grieving mothers were anonymously guided into belief loops, many of which ended in attempted abductions." Naomi's stomach turned. "He was building a religion. A cult," Vaughn corrected, "built around the lie that the state systematically replaces or erases children, and that only those willing to reclaim them are worthy of motherhood." Naomi exhaled. "He didn't just want to rewrite families. He wanted to punish the ones who took his." Vaughn raised an eyebrow. "You know the origin point?" "We do now," Naomi said. 5 years ago, Langford lost custody of his son, not because of system error, because of sustained psychological abuse allegations. On record. Gaslighting, sleep deprivation, isolation. His wife fought for custody and won. She moved states and severed ties. Langford vanished and re-emerged as a savior for broken women, Vaughn said, shaking his head. "Classic pathology. Build a lie until someone else believes it," Martinez approached. phone in hand. Local judge just signed the full warrant. We're clear to raid all known properties tied to Langford's aliases. But here's the kicker. We found the real Ethan's mother. She's been looking for him for 4 years. Langford faked his death in a fire, using staged records, and a buried doll with false DNA. It was all premeditated. Naomi didn't speak for a moment. The air around her felt thick with dust and unfinished grief. She looked at the SUV where Ethan was now curled up asleep, Coda's head resting gently across the boy's legs. His breath slow, his eyes never closed, still watching. "Bring her in," Naomi said softly. "Let him go home." The next 48 hours unfolded like the unraveling of a web soaked in truth. Langford, under interrogation, remained calm, unrepentant, even as charges mounted against him. He spoke of systems and destiny, of biological resonance and emotional realignment, terms he'd crafted into a pseudo-scientific theology. "I wasn't kidnapping," he told Naomi across the interrogation glass. "It was correcting. The state doesn't love, it processes. These women, Olivia, Rebecca, Anya, they were discarded. I gave them something real." Naomi didn't flinch. "You gave them a lie wrapped in hope. You turned their pain into your tool. That's not correction. That's cruelty." Langford leaned forward. "You lost my son because the courts decided my grief was too loud, too sharp. They told me I was unstable, but I remembered him, every day. The sound he made when he laughed, the way he clutched his blanket. No law can erase that. And when I saw it in others, the same ache, the same loss, I knew I wasn't alone." Naomi stood. "You weren't, but you chose to weaponize connection instead of healing it." As she left the room, Coda waited at the door. He was perking. She reached down, brushing his fur, grounding herself once more. Meanwhile, at Rainford Hospital, Olivia Maris was undergoing her first therapeutic debriefing session since her breakdown. The psychiatrist assigned, an independent trauma specialist, was careful, patient, methodical. Olivia responded slowly but with increasing clarity. "He told me Sophia was Charlie," she whispered, "that my memory had gaps, that mothers forget details after trauma. But I didn't forget his scent or his—" The psychiatrist nodded. "And now?" Olivia's hands trembled. "I see what he did. He made me trade grief for obsession, and I nearly hurt the only child I still had in my life." "You mean your niece?" Olivia nodded. "Claire's baby." "You's here, you know," the doctor said gently. "She wants to see you." Olivia's eyes welled. "After everything I did, she understands it wasn't you, not really, it was him." Moments later, Olivia stood in the visitor room, hands clenched tightly, shoulders hunched with shame. The door opened, and Claire stepped in slowly, holding Sophia, whose small hands clutched her mother's sleeve. The two sisters looked at each other across the space that had nearly— Claire was the first to move. She crossed the room and pulled Olivia into a quiet, shaking embrace, tears rolling down both their cheeks. "You came back," Claire whispered. "You found yourself." Olivia choked on the words. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know where I was." He made it sound so real. Claire kissed her sister's temple. "He's gone. And we're still here. That's what's real." In the days that followed, Langford's network was dismantled piece by piece. Every cabin, warehouse, and false identity traced back to a single goal: reconstructing the family he lost by controlling the ones others still had. The media called it the Grief Architect, a twisted mastermind who engineered despair into obedience. But within the police unit, they called it what it really was: manipulation at its most insidious. Naomi filed the final report at her desk late one evening as the sun dipped behind the city skyline. Across from her, Coda lay curled on a blanket, his breathing soft, his eyes watching the door out of habit. Martinez dropped off the last piece of paperwork. "The boy's reunited with his mother," he said. "Real mother. She cried for 10 minutes straight when she held him. She thought she'd never hear his voice again." Naomi smiled softly. "He'll remember her," she said. "It'll take time, but he will." That night, as she left the precinct and walked through the quiet lot under a sky scattered with stars, Coda trotted beside her, steps light, body finally at ease. She paused beside her car, looked down at him, and whispered, "You saw it all before we did." Every time, Coda raised his head, gave one soft whine, then leaned into her side. Naomi crouched, wrapped her arms around his thick neck, and let the silence hold them. Not because it was over, but because for the first time in weeks, they had won. Not just a case, not just a rescue, but a truth reclaimed, a bond restored. And for those who had been broken, twisted, or nearly lost, the long path forward had finally begun, with eyes open, wounds acknowledged, and names no longer stolen. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We share real, gripping stories like this every week. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it Coda's instincts, Olivia's awakening, or the final rescue of Ethan? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your insight means everything. And tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you.